Hi there, this is David from Honest IELTS. Today we're going to be talking about part 3 of the IELTS speaking exam. This is where the examiner will ask you some questions connected to the topic of part 2. Part 2 is where you must speak for 2 minutes by yourself after 1 minute of preparation. So, for example, if part 2 was this task, this one, like describe a memorable trip you've had, you should say where you went on the trip, what you did on the trip, and explain why it was memorable. You might get questions like this in part 3. For example, this one, why do you think people enjoy traveling to other countries? Do you think travel has become easier or more difficult in recent years? Do you think technology has changed the way people plan and experience trips? Do you think more people will travel internationally in the future or less? And what are the advantages and disadvantages of tourism for a local economy? So these are all questions around travel and tourism, which was the topic of part 2. Now, part 3 is important because it's where the examiner kind of decides whether you can go up to the higher bands or you're going to stay at the lower bands. They will have a list of questions in front of them. Some of them will be easier, some of them will be more difficult. They will start with the easier questions. If they feel that you can answer them well, then they will move on to the more difficult ones. If they feel you can't, they will stay with the easier ones. Okay, now in this video, I'm going to give you 5 tips that will help you perform effectively in part 3 of the IELTS speaking exam. Okay. Now, tip 1 for part 3 of the IELTS speaking exam, it's not even really a tip. It's really the important thing is don't panic during this part. The questions can look quite complicated, and you may think, I don't even know the answer of these questions in my own language, so how can I answer them in English? You are not expected to be an expert in education, geography, tourism, economics, technology. They only are really focusing on your English, your ability to put together ideas, but they don't need to be very detailed. You just need to show that you can structure your ideas when answering a question. Okay? Now, tip 2 is kind of connected to this. Because you're not expected to be an expert on these questions, it's okay to use some phrases to sort of buy a little bit of time during the questions to show that you need some thinking time. So if they ask you a question and you're not so sure what to say, you can say things like, I haven't thought about that before, but I'd say, or off the top of my head, I think, or let me think about that for a second. Now, you don't want to do this for every single question, but for questions which are more difficult, more challenging, it's perfectly okay to do this. Learn some of these useful phrases that help you buy time and give you time to think a little bit before giving your answers. One point here is do avoid saying, that's an interesting question, or that's a good question. This is these phrases are very well known to examiners, and they do sound a little artificial and false, so I would avoid using those. Okay, tip 3 for part 3 of the speaking exam is you need to make sure you're building vocabulary and grammar and idioms and phrases and collocations around key topics that are frequently discussed in part 2 and part 3 of the speaking exam. So things like education, work, leisure time, the environment, technology, these frequently come up in the exam. So it's important that you build vocabulary around those topics, not just learning lots and lots of lists of vocabulary, building phrases, common expressions that you can use. I've got a web page which you can use for free, where you can sort of click on different topics and you can see different collocations and phrases that are commonly used with keywords related to those topics. Build those up, make notes on them, and be ready to use them when discussing any of these topics. Now, tip 4 for part 3 of the speaking exam is to make sure you are prepared for the types of questions that they ask you in this section and have the right language to respond to them. So, for example, if you have a question like, well, why do people enjoy traveling abroad or traveling internationally? You can answer something like this. I think there are several reasons why people travel abroad. One reason is to experience different countries and cultures, learn more about how they live, the food, the language, the daily life. A second one is the weather. For example, people from colder countries, it's a chance for them to sunbathe and relax in better weather. Another possible reason is that they have family in these countries. You can see I'm structuring that language. This is a question asking for reasons. So I'm structuring that question and my answer with the specific vocabulary. So you can see the language like one reason is, a second one or a second reason is, another possible reason is. Using this kind of language will show that you can organize your answers in a structured way. Okay, you can learn these expressions. You don't necessarily need to learn the specific questions, but you know that when you hear an opinion question, why do you think, you need to give reasons for that. Okay, you might also, for example, see a question like, how has tourism changed over the last 20 years? Or how has tourism changed due to technology? This is often asking for a comparison between the past and the present. So you can use specific phrases, tenses, to show the comparison. So for example, you can say, well, in the past, people used to book their holidays through a travel agent, but nowadays they go online and do it. Or you could say 20 years ago, most people booked their holidays through an agent. Now they just go online. Or if we're talking about a subject like education, today many people study online, whereas in the past that was impossible. So again, you've got these expressions like in the past people used to, nowadays they. Today many people, whereas in the past they. You may also get questions asking to talk about sort of the future and what might be possible in the future. So you get questions like, what do you think tourism will be like in the future? Or do you think more people will travel internationally in the future? Here, we need to use the language of the future, but also the language of uncertainty, because we don't know what it will be like in the future. So we can say things like, oh, it's likely that people will travel more in the future. Or it's possible that countries will prevent more people coming into their country. Or in the future, we might see space travel or something like that. So again, these expressions, it's likely that people will, it's possible that will, in the future we might see. Lots of fixed expressions we can use and be ready to use when answering questions about the future. You may also get sort of advantages and disadvantages questions, like what are the advantages and disadvantages of tourism for a local economy? Again, you can use fixed structures and expressions to talk about this. So, I think there are a few pluses and minuses to tourism for the local economy. You can say, on the one hand, on the other hand. One advantage of tourism is that, however, one disadvantage is that. So these phrases like a few pluses and minuses, on the one hand, on the other hand, one advantage of something, however, one disadvantage is. Okay, these provide these frames or structures for you to be able to add your ideas. Okay, my fifth and final tip for part 3 of the speaking exam is that you need to practice answering as many of these types of questions as possible. Don't memorize the answers. Don't try to guess what the question is going to be in the exam. There can be many different questions, but if you keep practicing answering these types of questions, so giving reasons, advantages and disadvantages, speculating or thinking about the future, you will learn the sort of the general language that will help you to answer these questions. And if you've learned the topic language and topic vocabulary, that will make it easier for you to put that language into those sort of frames or structures. You can use AI to generate these questions and to perhaps give you some feedback on them. For example, you can use a prompt like this. I won't read it all, but I'll leave it on the screen and you can see what it is. Basically, it asks AI to generate questions for you and then to give you feedback on your answers. Okay. The more you do that, the more comfortable you'll be able to answer these questions when it comes to the exam. The exam is always a very stressful experience, so the more practice you've done, the easier this will be. Okay, I hope you found that useful. Part 3 can often be quite challenging, quite difficult, but with good preparation and learning some of the language and structures that you can use in this section, it should be easier. If you want to learn more, you want to keep up with IELTS tips, we do have a WhatsApp group that you can join. If you're looking to do sort of a full IELTS test, or you just want to do sort of a diagnostic interview where you get an idea of your general level of English, feel free to go to my website and sign up for a free 20-minute consultation. Hope you found that useful. If you know anyone taking the exam, do pass these videos on, and I hope to see you in the next one. I'll see you later.